first, our top story takes us back to California and the Prop 22 debate as it relates to AB 5. John Kingston has been covering the story, and he joins us now. John, thanks so much for being here this morning.
How you doing, Anthony? And how are you doing, Kaylee? It's been a fun year.
Been a fun year. AB 5, Prop 22, all of that has been kind of dramatic. And now we've got Prop 22 back in court to have its day. What's going on with that legislation?
Well, let's first recap everything that's happened, of course. So AB 5 is the law on regulating independent contractors in California. It passed the legislation, was signed by the governor in 2019. On the ballot, under the initiative process of California, which is a very powerful initiative process in that state, in 2020, the voters fairly overwhelmingly voted to exempt gig drivers like Uber drivers, Lyft drivers, DoorDash drivers from from AB 5. And this is particularly notable because it was primarily gig drivers that were the target of AB 5, that and trucking. So the supporters of Prop 22 went to court, and a county court, and an Alameda County Court judge ruled that Prop 22 was unconstitutional, and ruled it because it said it was in violation of the state's workers' compensation clause. I shouldn't say clause, laws. So the backers of Prop 22 took that to court. That now finally had its day in court last week. That's like pretty more than a year and a half after the original ruling. The arguments at this case, at this point, are all legalist. They're all very legal arguments. They're not whether AB 5 is a good rule. They're not whether gig drivers are good people. None of that stuff. It's all strictly a legal battle over whether Prop 22, in fact, did overreach. The argument in favor of overturning the county court judge is that the initiative right in the state of California is really all powerful as the legislature, and that the judge was wrong in overturning the will of the people. The counter argument in favor of what the judge did is that, yes, the initiative power is very powerful, but it is not all powerful, and that there were provisions in Prop 22 dealing first with workers' compensation and also with the right to organize for collective bargaining that were in violation of the state's constitution. There are also legal arguments regarding how you can change the provisions of Prop 22, that this was like unprecedented what the rules they made. So, I mean, you can go back, if you look at the story I published yesterday, there is a link in there to the proceedings in the appellate court. And I will warn you right now, it is very much a legal thing. If you're going in there to hear about gig workers and their value to America, you're not going to hear it. You're going to hear very strict legal arguments.
And John, as we see this development now, where does this place gig workers within California? Does this move them a little bit closer or further away from where they want to be?
Well, when the county court judge overturned Prop 22, he did stay it. So the Prop 22 block on gig workers falling under AB 5 that went into effect with the vote in Prop 22 remains in effect. I did see one reference that they expect a decision in 90 days. After that, I would imagine it would get appealed to the California Supreme Court regardless of what the decision is. I would imagine the stay would stay in place for that. As I told you, it already was like a year and a half from the lower court decision to the appellate court decision. I don't know how long it's going to be before it shows up in California Supreme Court. And then, we're right back to the whole AB 5 thing. Maybe the losing side seeks certiorari from the U.S. Supreme Court, and that could take a long time too. So this still may take a long time to play out. It's quite a case. The whole AB 5 Prop 22 nexus is providing rich lawyers with lots of work and poor journalists like myself with things to write about.
So that's exactly the next question, right? Is that nothing truly happens with this until someone decides to take someone to court over whether they're not or they are or not in compliance with it, right? It's that same kind of story with the AB 5 legislation. It's not like there are these like people coming in to audit your company saying you're in compliance or you're not compliant. It's all that legal battle. Have we seen any of that actually happen yet, where someone's been taken to court over the case and saying, hey, you're violating these rules, now let's see those consequences?
Well, you wouldn't see it yet in Prop 22 because it is stayed. In AB 5, I do think that there are no stories of that, but I cannot imagine the state regulators now, given the power under AB 5, are just sitting back. They are, I'm quite sure, preparing some cases right now against certain companies. I'm sure they are fielding complaints and tips, whatever, from truck drivers who feel that they've been treated like employees but are legally independent contractors. And in some ways, this is good for the trucking industry. AB 5 is not completely prescriptive. It doesn't say that you can do A, B, C, D, and E, but you can't do F, G, H, I, and J. You're going to need a body of law to help trucking companies know what they can and cannot do. Now, the problem is that there's going to be a few poor guinea pigs out there who are going to be the ones that get prosecuted or sued or whatever by the state, and the resolution of their cases will presumably establish that body of law, which people will then, truckers will trucking companies will have a better idea of what they can and cannot do. Those guinea pigs have yet to be identified. I'm quite sure the state regulators have a pretty good beat on who they're going to be, and it would not surprise me if in the first few months of 2023 we get some kind of a case of the state going against trucking company, Acme. I shouldn't say Acme Trucking Company. There's probably somebody out there called Acme Company. So, trucking company ABC in California, and that'll have to get litigated out, and however it's resolved will help to establish the body of law that lawyers will be able to draw from in trying to defend their clients and trying to really protect their clients in what they need to do in regards to the classification of their workers.
And John, speaking of guinea pigs, is there any precedent for anything like this that we can follow a similar framework for, so we can kind of have some idea of how it would turn out, or is this all new territory altogether?
It's a tough question. I would say that I would really need to be, again, remember, it's, as I mentioned, the arguments that were in court were all very legalistic. They really did not deal with gig drivers per se. So you would really, I read a lot of the briefs and I listened to the arguments, and there were references to a whole variety of previous cases regarding the state's power of initiative. So it is fairly, as I said, it's a fairly strong power. It does not appear to be all encompassing and all sweeping, and that's really what the appellate court is going to have to figure out. So whatever decision they come down on is not really a gig worker or a truck driver decision per se. It's very much adding to the previous legacy of earlier decisions regarding the power of California's initiative.
Totally understandable. It's going to be interesting to watch going forward in 2023. John, I'm going to pivot topics with you really quickly to diesel and get your thoughts on this. We saw the DOE price come out Monday, as you wrote about yesterday in the news, and we're now starting to see retail prices creep closer to wholesale prices, right? Closing that spread a little bit. Give us a quick little overview about the diesel market right now.
Yeah, so the diesel market has actually kind of gotten boring in the last week. It's been relatively steady, but yeah, you're right. So, in Sonar, we have the fuels.usa data series. It shows a very simple spread between the average retail price and the average wholesale price. I would say normalcy in that spread is about $1 to $1.10. As of a couple of weeks ago, it got up to $2. And really the reason is when markets are as crazy as they are, and really believe me, historically, this is a nutty diesel market. In going through the numbers, I have a tough time finding anything like this. Retailers are just not set up to react that fast to declines or even increases in wholesale prices and wholesale prices and futures prices. So with those prices having plummeted over the last couple of weeks, retail is sort of coming down at its own relatively steady pace. It's not even that steady. The declines over the past few weeks in that DOE number, I think it's well over 40 cents in 3 weeks, which is a lot. So it is now catching up to these big declines in the wholesale and futures markets of the prior weeks. The other thing I want to point out, it's the heating oil market. The diesel market is tied to the heating oil market, which in turn is tied to natural gas, which of course is tied to the weather. And while there's all these reports of a really serious blast of cold weather this weekend throughout much of the country, the fact is by the end of next week, it's supposed to be fairly moderate. And the heating oil market and the diesel market have already taken that into consideration, and prices have been declining these past few days, which is kind of very strange given the current weather forecast for the next few days. So diesel's kind of calmed down, but retail obviously has a way to go to catch up with those earlier drops.
And John, if people want to catch more of your insights and get more of your content, how can they do that?
J. Kingston at freightwaves.com. Please send me a message. I'm John H. Kingston on Twitter, and Drilling Deep drops every Friday. This week, of course, it'll be Thursday. And it's this week I've got, who do I have this week? Oh, Dave Heller from the Truckload Carriers Association talking about Washington issues regarding trucking in 2023.
All right, John, well, thank you so much for joining us this morning and all of 2022. We will catch up with you in the new year.
Yes, you too.
All right, we're going to head on over to the wall. We've got our first carrier